Hello again, this is the Libertarian Dilettante, and welcome to episode 7 of my Airline Club Let's Play. So, I had intended to combine this with the previous video, but then disaster struck. And it's not as bad as a pandemic that grinds the airline industry to a halt, but for me it's a problem. And that is that this game includes an Olympics event. The various airlines that are large enough get to vote on where the Olympics will be held, and they have selected London Heathrow. Now you might be thinking, surely that's a good thing for me, right? More traffic and demand into my headquarters. That's going to increase the prices I can charge for my routes maybe. But I don't think it's going to work out so well for me. The first reason is because I'm not really big enough to capitalize on increased demand. That's not a problem that I have. Most of these routes have way more than enough potential demand, and there are still plenty of cities I can fly to. The major problem with this is that it puts a magnifying glass on London Heathrow. All the airlines throughout the world are now thinking, hey, let's take a look at London Heathrow. How can I maximize my profits to London Heathrow? And potentially, they might not only start up new routes, but they might even set up new hubs in London. And in fact, there could be some limey bloke out there right now who's thinking, ah yes, London, let's give that a go. And even if he were starting from scratch, he would still have more operating capital than I do. So I'm worried that a bunch of people are going to come into London, set up shop, and start opening up new routes, taking away my potential, and competing with my existing routes. The Olympics, I think, are a pretty big deal. I've never paid much attention to them before. The other problem with the Olympics is that experienced players, have claimed that they would not want the Olympics to come to their city because after the Olympics are over, there's a big drop in demand. And that potentially could be a problem because by then maybe I'll have some routes that are sort of pushed to the edge of their demand, and if there's a big drop, it will mess up the prices I can charge. But there's nothing I can really do about it, so, well, I mean, I can plan for it, but I can't stop it. Now, I'm going to need to borrow money. If we look, I have 16 slots available here, so I'm probably going to need 2 more planes for London, and I have another 10 slots here, so I can probably get away with 1 plane for Naples. Now, I had considered buying bigger planes for London, but I'm not going to do that now because I want to instead focus on opening more routes. So I guess we better get started with that. I decided I would need 3 planes. I'm not going to expand Naples just yet. I can borrow up to $45 million, but I'm not going to do that because the weekly repayments would be $225,000, and I'm currently making, this is my cash flow now, I have almost $400,000, so I could definitely afford it based on my current income, but I don't like to push that right to the edge, of course, and especially with the potential for new airlines competing with me, I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable position. Here's the income sheet, by the way. This was our income before our last expansion. This is kind of artificial. I think it's based on the fact that I bought a used airplane that they considered a good value, so they call that a whole bunch of profit. But it's a one-time thing, and it's not really profit anyway, in my opinion. So realistically, we're looking at about $360,000 a week in profit. And this is better than we were doing when we closed down at Istanbul. So that much is good. In fact, if it weren't for the Olympics, I wouldn't really have anything to complain about at all. and maybe the Olympics will work out just fine. In fact, I was taking a look, and I'm going to keep an eye on this. So these are all the airlines with headquarters. These are all the airlines with hubs. It's actually quite a bit less than it was when I first opened up, and that's because there was recently a new, I guess you could say, patch to the game that closed down a lot of the old airlines that had been abandoned and were inactive. So even though they were inactive, they were still flying their routes, and more importantly, they were still putting demand on the server. Now that they're gone, I think I counted 12 headquarters in London Heathrow and another 17 hubs. So I might check back on that and just see if my fears materialize and a bunch of airlines set up shop here. All right, I'm going to buy more of these Embraer 120s. I can search by inventory, which I like to do a fair bit, and then because I have 5 of these planes, they come right to the top. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to purchase, but I can't afford it yet. So, how much should I borrow? Each plane costs $8 million. That's $24 million. I think that the $4 million I have in the bank is enough to open new routes and give me a little bit of a cushion. But just to be extra safe, I guess I'll borrow $25 million. All right, now because there are no commas in this number, I like to confirm down here that I am in fact borrowing $25 million. And here's the repayment amount. I actually think that I'm going to be able to make that much more in cash every week just by buying those 3 planes and putting them to work. But I don't like to push things too hard. So I'll go ahead and borrow that amount. I always take the 5-year loans. Again, that's 260 weeks. And now that I've done that, I have to wait 13 weeks before I can take out any more loans. Here's the interest rate. I don't worry too much about the interest rate, to be honest. Whether it's high or low, I just borrow when I think it's a good time to borrow, as far as expanding my business. Now I can buy airplanes. I'm going to come back here and purchase one of these. I guess I could purchase all 3 at once, but I prefer to do it this way. Now, I need to set up routes. Of course, I've already taken a look using the flight map, as I always do. And I want to find some routes that have a low setup cost, because I'm kind of worried that there's going to be more competition. And I also want to diversify quite a bit. So this city, Derry, has a fairly low population. It's not going to be high on anyone's radar. So I plan a flight. Turns out there's almost 300 direct demand, and because it's domestic, the setup cost is very low. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. That's the one flight left over from my previous plane, and I probably want 150. That sounds pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I could also be adding flights to my existing routes, but I sort of want to stake claims. So if a bunch of new airlines come in and they're doing things kind of the same way I do, I want them to at least see that there are these routes, although I just got done saying that I didn't think that these particular routes would be high on anyone's list. But you never know. This one only has 150, but the setup cost is really low. On the other hand, I have enough money to set up some routes. So I'm going to come down and stake a claim at Sevilla. This one is a longer route, so it has more potential for profit. There's a lot of direct demand. I could certainly imagine another airline wanting to come in and compete here. So I will do that. And now with my last 3 flights, I guess I have a couple options. I could just use them to increase flights on existing routes. I could come up here and fly to Perth with only 3 flights a week. That's probably a reasonable plan. Or I could stake a claim on a new route. I think if I take that route to Perth, there's a good chance I won't want it later, although it's so cheap it hardly matters. How close am I to my route limit? I guess that's what I should be asking myself. Currently have 8, I can go up to 15. I think there were some routes here that were, like London to Krakow. 1,400. And I'm still the only one flying it, I believe. Yeah. So maybe I will just, oh wait, I have 6 slots available. Why was I thinking I only had 3? Okay. Well, then I will just set up a brand new route. So I like these southern routes. I'm not too worried about having geographic distribution because there are so many flights out of London anyway. I think Granada was pretty promising, but just for a little variety, maybe we should fly to France, and I think Montpellier doesn't have any competition. That is correct. There's 300 direct demand. That's certainly enough to justify a route. Let's just compare that quickly to Granada. 400. Well, I'm feeling kind of greedy. Maybe I will just take another Spanish route. And that's apparently what our airline specializes in, which doesn't really matter. Oh, that's why I'm thinking 3. So I do indeed need to buy another plane, but that's what I was planning on doing anyway. So let's go ahead and make that purchase. I'm going to want this plane in London anyway. So I'll get 1 more for London. Three plus 2. Let's create that route. Now, it just feels a little awkward to me to only have 2 flights a week. So I'm going to use my final slot in London Heathrow to increase this to 3. Now we move on to Naples. Here I have 9 slots. Now I'm not as worried about competition. So in theory, I could just increase flights to all of these cities, and maybe I'll actually do that. Yeah, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do. At least I'll start out like that because I only have 2 flights a week to Genoa. So I'm going to purchase another plane. It's set to the plane that's already assigned on this route. Naples. If I bought it in the wrong city, it's actually easy to move planes between bases once they've arrived. And these planes arrive immediately. Okay, 775 direct demand, so I can use about as much as I want. I'll go up to 4 though, because I think these other routes are going to give me a little more bang for my buck, just because they're longer. Here we have about 400 direct demand. I'm going to add 2 more. That takes me up to 210. That's barely half of the direct demand, so I think there's going to be plenty of scope to increase the price. Here, I still have 5 slots available. Well, there's 700 direct demand. I might just put them all into Warsaw. That takes me up to still less than half. I think I can charge quite a lot of money. If I need to pull flights off of this later for some reason, I can always do that. Okay, I've used up all of my slots. I still have 4 million in the bank, so maybe I borrowed a little too much, but it'll be okay. Soon enough, I'll be wanting to spend that money anyway. And in the meantime, I have a comfortable amount just in case something really crazy were to happen. Now I'm going to take a look at the individual routes. If I organize by load factor, it looks a little weird because these 3 are brand new, and these I just increased capacity on. So I didn't actually check, but if we look, this one is solid green. I could even increase the price still further. I'm going to go ahead and do that just a tiny bit. Naples to Genoa. Yeah, we can increase the price a little bit. This connects 2 hubs. Normally, I wouldn't want to increase the price too much. And there's competition. Although we're so much lower than the competition, I'm just going to leave it though for now. Once it gets a little better established, I might raise the price on that too. Yeah, 1 little notch. Okay, this route I didn't make any adjustments to. It's totally solid still. We are at less than half of the direct demand, so I'm going to make a 2-click increase here. Cordoba, similar situation. Valencia, even more so. Now it is possible that I'm going to go up too high, because even though there's a lot of direct demand, people get really sour about the idea of paying way more than the default cost. And so demand will drop off very quickly and become erratic if I go up too high. And did I actually make that increase? Have I hit update? I don't think so. 556. And what were we at? Okay, I can see my previous price here. So yeah, I did make the increase. Here, wow, we have a lot of flights. But we're still nowhere near the direct demand. Let's just see what the default is. So I'm going to go quite a lot higher. Yeah, sure. I'm going from -1 notch to +3. So that's a very big price increase, but I still think it will hardly affect demand. The only big disadvantage here is if somebody's looking closely at my routes, they're going to see, or if they're looking at all beyond just the fact that I have it, they're going to see that I'm charging a lot more than the default price, and they're going to recognize right away that there's the potential for competition. But that's going to be pretty obvious just from the fact that I only have such small capacity. And here, whatever we're charging now, let's make it more. Actually, though, I do want to see what the default is. So I was currently at +2. Let's go to +4. All right, that's all of my routes. So we should be taking in a lot more money if that goes as planned. If we take a quick look at London Heathrow, here we go. Our awareness still has plenty of room for growth, so I expect to be getting a lot of slots again next time. And my income is growing fast enough that I think I'll be able to borrow money and continue to expand as I have been. One more thing I want to do that's going to also probably give me more slots is increase my service quality. You can see it's reached this level. Let's take it up to 19 and see what that costs. Still very little. That will give me some time before I have to come back. I'll probably check on this again within half a day or something, maybe around the time that loan, in 13 weeks, so that I can take a new loan. And until then, I think I should be okay. So thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like.